Hello, welcome, and an excellent evening. And tonight we have an Amiga 500 here. This is my Amiga that I use for tinkering around. It has a new socket in to allow me to install newer kick-ROM versions. There's a little jumper wire to deliver 7 MHz clock to the expansion port here. But other than that, it's relatively unmolested. Still has the old 8371 Agnes chip that can only address 512K of chip RAM. There's a little bit of corrosion left over from a leaky memory expansion, but it works just fine. Even the disk drive works. Everything is in great condition otherwise. The keyboard is a bit yellowed, but and it's not functioning very well due to the rubber on the bottom being not very conductive anymore. This will be a restoration project in the future, so we'll come back to that, but today I want to use it to show off two accelerator cards that I have and that are quite interesting. The first one is this one here. It is the so-called Lazarustorm. As it says on the board, it's an A500 adapter for the PiStorm. I'm sure many of you have already heard about the PiStorm in the last 3 or 4 years. It came out. It is basically, the PiStorm is basically this green PCB here that fits onto the Motorola 68000 socket. But as you can see here, it is not, should belong like this. It is not in the 68000 socket, because I do like my Amiga 500 to be more or less stock, to be able to run it in a mostly original configuration with Kick 1.3 with 7 MHz and nothing else, 512 or 1 megabyte of memory, and no soldering, no weird things inside. So this thing actually goes on the expansion port like so. I'm not going to do this because I'm fearing that it might break off something. And you can just plug it in before you turn on the machine and take it out when you don't need it. So that's a good thing. This is of course not all you need. The next thing you need is the Raspberry Pi. This here is a Raspberry Pi Zero version 2. Alternatively, you can fit a Raspberry Pi 3 on here. It might even be possible that the Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 are also supported by now, but when I bought this, it was only supporting the Raspberry Pi 3 or the Zero 2. The Zero has the advantage that it is very cool running. It consumes very little power, still has 4 CPU cores, has HDMI out. So the PiStorm can actually also function as a graphics card as well, if you want that. It can emulate a 68 or 30 or even 040, I think, maybe even higher. CPU performance way above what you can achieve here. But we'll have a look at the benchmark in a little while. So basically, you can choose between at least 2 different emulators. The PiStorm also functions, at least in a prototype form, in an Atari ST, for example. And I think in theory you could make it probably run on other 68000 machines as well, maybe even classic Macintosh or something. But it was designed for the Amiga, and especially for the Amiga 500 with this kind of socket. And I think Amiga 1000 is also possible with some adjustments. Anyway, as you can see, even without this Lazarustorm package, it will be a tight fit in here because the keyboard has to go on top. So I do like that this whole huge stack here fits onto the side and I can plug it in and off as I like. There are also 3D printed cases for this that you can print yourself. Haven't found a very good one yet. I do have one, but I'm not super happy because it's also designed for the Pi 3 in theory. Yeah, but that's that. You also have Wi-Fi, of course, on the 0, so you can use that to drop some data onto this thing, because it also is able to emulate a hard disk, which is very important, especially for games that run from multiple floppy disks, or if you want to run something like WHD load, which is a kind of software that lets you run packaged games without having to install them basically straight from the hard disk, even if they didn't support hard disk installs, stuff like that. For that you need more chip RAM, so this Amiga will not be doing that. It needs at least 1 megabyte of chip RAM to run reliably, but you can still use the hard disk to install regular games. But there are some other drawbacks that I will come to later when we test this out, and I'll explain that. The second card that I want to show you is this one here, and you can already see that it is a similar form factor. It also goes in to the expansion port here to the side. It doesn't require any modifications at all to the Amiga. As I said, the Lazarustorm here does require the botch wire here on revision 5 motherboards, because it requires the 7 MHz clock signal from the main board to arrive there. Yeah, and it will disable the CPU that is in the socket. You don't have to remove the CPU, same here, the CPU will be disabled. This is the Individual Computers ACA500plus. And yeah, you can already see it is very nicely manufactured. It doesn't take a micro SD card, but instead you have up to 2 compact flash cards. One to the left here is the auxiliary card, if I can get it in, which is hot pluggable. You can remove it while the machine is on and transfer data to your Amiga, which is very nice. It can be FAT formatted on the PC. And the other one is the boot card. I've taken a 1 GB card here and a 256 MB card, which is plenty of space for an Amiga 500. And this whole thing comes with a 68HC1000 10 MHz CPU. So this is basically totally compatible, because it is basically the same CPU as this one here in a PLCC package. However, those can be overclocked quite significantly. My mask revision here, 4C71T, sadly runs only up to 21 MHz stable, but supposedly other smaller masks or better mask, whatever processes, can potentially be overclocked to 28 or even more megahertz. And this translates mostly into exactly a speed up. Like if this runs on 14 or 21 megahertz, you have twice or 3 times the CPU power available. Of course, some other limiting factors will be the custom chips here that, of course, won't get faster. But everything that is very CPU heavy will be accelerated. Also, this thing comes with 8 megabytes of RAM, which is very nice, which is also directly usable by the Amiga OS. It also comes with a flash memory, and if I should guess, I would guess that it's probably this chip here maybe. Not quite sure, but that could very well be. In this flash memory you get a Kick 3.1 ROM, properly licensed, so no fishy things happening there. And besides the Kick 3.1, also Workbench 3.1 properly licensed. And you will see when we insert a blank disk here that it will install everything onto this compact flash card, and basically it's a plug-and-play solution, whereas the PiStorm here has a lot of manual setup and you have to pick your firmware that you want to use, etc., etc. This here is just plug and play. There's also room for expansions on this thing here. There is a connector on the bottom side, basically, because it goes in like this, which already says here ACA500 connector. The ACA500 is an expansion for this thing that allows you to install an Ethernet card, basically. It's not very cheap, it's like 90 euros or something. But if you want to have network access on your Amiga500, that is a very simple way to do that. There's also this port here. I think this is the real-time clock port. You can put a real-time clock on there with a little coin cell that hopefully won't leak, but it's strictly optional. That's that. There's a JTAG header here that you won't need. It's, I guess, for programming the two CPU LEDs, if they ever lose their programming or something. There's a bunch of standoffs here to make the card lie flat. If you plug it in, it's also very nice. And then, of course, there's this weird thing here. And this is actually the same expansion port that is in the Amiga1200. And here there's another magic piece. You can actually plug in Amiga1200 accelerator cards. Individual Computers, for example, also sells a couple of Amiga1200 accelerator cards with 68030s or similar things, and even more RAM. And you can just plug them in here. They will again disable this CPU and this CPU, and then you have a proper 68030 powered Amiga. Still, of course, not with the AGA or ECS chipset, but the original chipset that you had on your A500 in the first place. But still, if you want raw power with original Motorola chips, that is another way to go. I probably will never do that. I'm pretty much fine with a 3x acceleration. But yeah, we can, I think, now plug this thing in and also the Lazarustorm and try to compare these and see what the capabilities, some of the capabilities are, because I won't be able to show everything, and what the performance of these are and what the user experience is. And then you can decide if you rather would like to go with this or this. Price-wise, they are actually not that far apart. This thing without the compact flash cards, you have to buy your own ones. And I do suggest to buy proper brands like SanDisk and Transcend from reputable sources. This thing here costs roughly 150 euros. Which sounds like a lot, but remember you get proper Kickstart 3.1 ROMs and Workbench 3.1 installation media on the flash included. So basically you have a plug-and-play solution. You just need to supply at least one card in the boot slot and you're ready to go. Whereas this thing here, you have to buy the Lazarustorm PCB, which was, I think, something like 20 euros, around-ish that, maybe a little bit more. And that's basically just a passive PCB, but it's manually assembled, obviously, because these things can't be done in a factory. And then you have to buy the PiStorm, which is another at least 50 euros, I think. I mean, it is open source, if I remember, so there could be multiple suppliers, but you will have to have a possibility to program the Altera FPGA or CPLD or whatever that is, to be able to actually get this running. And you have to buy at least a 02, which costs you at least 20 euros, or a Raspberry Pi 3. So you're talking about 20, 30 to 50 euros on top of that. So all in all, you will pay at least 100 euros for this, maybe a bit more for this whole stack. And then you still need Kick 3.1 and Workbench 3.1. You can of course get it from other sources, but if you want to go the legal route, basically you will have to buy those as well. And then I think you will end up almost at the same price point as the ACA500plus. So yeah, price-wise, they are roughly in the same league, at least in an order of magnitude. And yeah, other than that, let's compare them. Okay, this is what you will be greeted with the first time you set this thing up. Of course, mine has already one or two things changed, but you can use the F keys basically to choose which configuration to run. You can either run it in a ROM 3.1 configuration or Kickstart 1.3, and also the standard A500 profile, which will put the card into so-called stealth mode, which means it is not disabled and not detectable via any means by normal programs. You can also install user ROMs if you want to have a different ROM. You can install stuff to the compact flash card. There's profile settings for the stealth or cloaking mode, an expert menu, and also for the regular mode, an expert menu. We can also select and save profiles, and yeah, that's actually pretty neat. Most importantly, F8 gets you into the normal configurations. Interesting here is the maximum CPU speed, which is currently set at 21 megahertz. So that you can set to, for example, 28 or 42 or 14 megahertz. Every card is guaranteed to run at 14 megahertz. Overclocking will function more or less depending on the CPU that's on there and maybe your power supply, if it's good enough, has low enough ripple, etc. My card runs very, very fine on 21 megahertz, so that's why I will leave it at that. There's also a ton of other options that I won't go into detail right now. You can just read the documentation, which is quite nice. So we'll leave it at 21 megahertz, so we should see roughly a 3 times speed up. The interesting thing here now is the F7 menu for your first time, and you can go and install onto the boot CF disk basically. You can also activate or deactivate the auxiliary CF slot. Currently there's nothing in there, but it's very useful to have that for exchanging data between your PC and your Amiga, for example. And you can either write install disks for Workbench 3.1, do a network install if you have the network option installed, or do the auto installer. We will do just like that, do the auto install, and we'll do everything for you mainly, and it will also create a small partition automatically for Workbench 1.3, but you have to manually copy a Work 1.3 floppy onto that partition, and if you do that, you can boot straight from hard disk in Kick 1.3, which is usually not possible. You have to patch that, but this Kick 1.3 that's on here comes with a patch basically, or it is getting patched. Probably they're using the built-in thing so that you can boot directly off the compact flash card, which is very nice and very important for older games, as we will see in a couple of minutes. So this is what it looks like when you basically install this. There will be a blank screen for a while. I'm gonna put the exposure a bit down. I think this is better. And you will see here it says 89% of disk 1, and we'll go through all the disks, swapping them automatically. I'm gonna skip through this because this is relatively boring, and we'll have a look at what the install system looks like. After a short while, it will give you the option to run the installer in English or in German. For you guys, I'm gonna do it in English, but there's of course different things possible. Then you take the installation medium. It found a FAT formatted disk with 510 megabytes. In the aux, it didn't find anything, so you can swap around the cards here at this point, but we'll just go ahead and do the installation. It will do the automatic partitioning installation, and yeah, we're gonna do that, and we'll check back once it is done. After the installation, the computer reboots upon your request, and then you end up in the regular boot menu. We press F1 now to boot the newly installed Workbench 3.1, and hopefully this should work. Takes a couple of seconds, but is actually relatively quick. There we are. This is now a blank Workbench 3.1 install. You will have two hard disks here. One is called Workbench 3.1, and you can already see this Amiga has 1 megabyte of chip mem, where 960 kilobytes are free, and 6.99 megabytes of other mem. Of course, I think the Amiga 500 without any tricks can only address 8 megabytes. So the 8 megabytes on the ACA500plus will be reduced by this 1 megabyte of chip mem, which I think might be taken from the main machine, not from the onboard, but not quite sure about that. Either way, we physically have 9 megabytes of memory in here, but 8 megabytes are usable, which is fine and good enough for basically everything that you could ever want. The work partition is basically where you put all your games and applications, and on this install it's empty. I will swap out this compact flash disk now for my already installed version, because I have a couple of utilities on there, and then we can do a benchmarking. So I fired up sysinfo here, the classic system information and benchmarking tool. It has correctly identified our ECS Agnes, that's the one that can do 1 megabyte, a standard Denise chip, a 68000 on the accelerator board, and let's do the speed test and see what it figures out. It's gonna say something like 21.5 megahertz here, which is pretty spot on. Comment is let's go. 2161 dry stones, 2161, and roughly 4 times the speed of an Amiga 600, which is nice. 3 times the speed of an Amiga 2000, and I think this is in part, the speed boost here is in part due to the fact that the A600 has to share the 1 megabyte with the chipset, so probably the access to the memory is relatively slow compared to the very fast memory we have here. The chip access here is also twice as fast as on the Amiga 600. And we are roughly on par with a 68020 at 14 megahertz. So yeah, we do have 7 megahertz more, but obviously the 68020 is a more efficient processor. And the 68030 beats us by roughly 2 times, which is pretty neat. It can also show us the memory that is installed. We have 6 megabytes of fast RAM, obviously, it says, with the ACA500plus identification. Then 500 kilobytes of slow RAM, which is our trap door expansion, I think. I think it's got confused here with the free amount of memory. It takes into account also the memory on the ACA. And the chip RAM again, 1 megabyte, which also includes the trapdoor expansion. But that's fine. So yeah, the memory is a bit weird here. Also, you can go to boards, and the ACA500 will identify itself here. Manufacturer ICOM.de, board type 02, and 64K of board size. There are some registers that you can program the card with, but you don't need to bother with that actually. So I would say that looks actually pretty good. I'm gonna disable the card now, and we can see how fast the original A500 is supposed to be. Alright, my other flash card is installed. Let's do the following. Let's first boot up the standard A500 profile, and I'm gonna put in my DF0 switcher to boot up Elite 2 Frontier, because that is actually a pretty hefty 3D game that is actually a little bit slow on the standard A500. So we're gonna boot it up in the... We can do either F1 or F3 with the 500K, 500K or the 1 megabyte chip. So it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna go with F1. And it can actually, auto select between DF0 and DF1. So that's pretty neat. Also, you can pick the overclocking here. We go with 7 megahertz PAL. And I think that should do it. It's unpacking the ROMs. Yeah, and as you can see, there's not many frames per second to go around. I will try to put the two things side by side in post-production, so you hopefully see that now. And I try to line it up as closely as possible. And you should be able to see that the frame rate is significantly higher when using the 21 megahertz accelerator, which is actually quite nice to see. Elite 2 is obviously a rather complex game for the Amiga 500, even though by today's standards it looks pretty awful, but back then it was pretty impressive to get procedurally generated planets on that scale. I mean, of course, there were already texture map games on the PC by the time this arrived, but for the Amiga, this was quite the achievement. One problem with old games on Kick 1.3 or Workbench 1.3, but it's more to do with the Kick 1.3, is that there are slight incompatibilities. This here is a game that many of you will probably know. It's Indiana Jones 4, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, by Lucasfilm Games, an awesome game that incidentally is also a bit slow when run in 7 MHz, so we're now booted into Kick 3.1 with 21 MHz, and it's really quite playable. Indy walks around quite nicely and smoothly. However, when you try to play the game, you will notice that the mouse cursor is offset compared to the screen. For example, if I want to click on take, which is this verb in German, I have to click a little bit above, and the newspaper that I want to pick up is also shifted down basically. And this is a bug because Indiana Jones was coded for Kick 1.3, and that's of course a little bit annoying, and that's where the magic of the ACA500plus comes in, because we can simply turn off the machine, turn it on again, and run Kick 1.3, which I'll do right now. So here we are in the boot menu. I'll press F2 to boot the 1.3 configuration, and I already have the little Workbench 1.3 installation on here, so it is booting directly off the hard drive. If I make sure that there's nothing else that it can boot off. Yeah, the screen is currently a bit too large. Let me fix that. That is due to Atlantis running in NTSC mode, sort of, or in NTSC resolution, and I stretch it so that you have a nice full screen. But I can go to my work folder, which is kind of messy, go to Atlantis and run the game again. And obviously, as you can see here, this is this is Atlantis, and this definitely looks like Workbench 1.3, I would say. Everybody would argue that this is Workbench 1.3. I think it has no about screen or something. So let's quickly fire it up and then have a look. So this is the game booted up. We are back at the starting screen, and now I can actually go onto the verb and use it. And this is obviously not the only game that has issues. I've had issues with the Sierra games, with Space Quest 3 when running in Kick 3.1, especially with a different sound driver, which will be shown in a different video because that's also very interesting. So you will have varying successes with games running in Kick 3.1. Some are compatible, some are not so much compatible. The Lucasfilm games are definitely some of the games that prefer to be run in Kick 1.3. And the ACA500plus makes this very easy. The alternative would be to use WHD load, but then you definitely need the 1 megabyte of chip RAM at least to be able to play these games at all. So that's not an option for everyone because those 8372 Agnes chips are really hard to get nowadays. They are getting rarer by the minute, and if you want to buy one, they can easily cost 50 to 60 euros on their own. And that's obviously pretty expensive. I got mine for much cheaper and I'm very grateful, but I don't have one for my second A500. So yeah, I'm very happy to have this card. Yeah, I think that is roughly everything I wanted to show you here. All the other games, like the Sierra adventure games, for example, are also profiting a lot from this card because the ports are relatively lackluster and not very high performing, doing a lot of stuff on the CPU, which probably could have been done on the chipset itself. So it runs much faster. The animations are much faster on 21 megahertz for sure. But now let's switch over to the PiStorm and the Lazarustorm and see what it can do and what its performance is. And now we booted up the PiStorm in the Lazarustorm module. On the side of the A500, one caveat right away. It seems, and I've heard that from another user as well, that the Lazarustorm doesn't always boot up on the first try on the A500 because it's a bit tricky. And I guess they didn't implement the same things that the ACA500 people did. So I had to press Control Amiga twice before it actually came up. Your mileage may vary, so it might be a bit more experimental. But if you get it running, and we are running here the EMU68 emulator, there are two. One is called Musashi, I think, and the other is EMU68. They have different advantages. EMU68 is by far the one with the higher performance, but it's so much performance, it's ridiculous. That's the one that we're currently running at. The Musashi has also some other advantages. I think it can emulate network cards. Both can emulate graphics cards, if I remember correctly, which I haven't done here. You will gain an HDMI output on the Raspberry Pi, which is very nice if you want to run modern applications, basically. But let's have a quick look. It already says here we have the 1 megabyte chip RAM. That cannot be emulated, basically. That is just the case on the hardware. But the fast RAM will be 362 megabytes. That's insane, and you can't really use that with the old applications. But let's have a look at sysinfo. It also fires up very fast. The CPU identifies as a 68040 with a 68882 FPU integrated. And if we do the benchmarking, remember we had 2,000 dry stones, 2,100 dry stones on the ACA500. Now we get 600,000 dry stones. The chip speed is still a little bit higher. There seems to be a slight payoff. The speed up versus the A600 doesn't fit in here anymore. I think there's the fourth digit here. Against the Amiga 2000, it's 858 times, and so on and so on and so on. It's even 30 times faster than a real A4000 with the 6804 here at 25 megahertz. Comment is virtual Amiga. Well, kind of, half. As you can see, there's so much speed here that it's really ridiculous. And there's not that much use, I would say. I will show you two examples where it might be interesting. All the adventure games like Indiana Jones, the Sierra games, the Larry, King's Quest, whatever, they will not run much faster. The action games will be similar. But Elite Frontier that we've seen before, that definitely is a good example. Probably the other flight simulators as well, but I'm going to show you that. And if you actually want to do stuff on here, like rendering things using some old 3D software, or doing productive things like using Final Writer, which I'll fire up in a second. That's also pretty nice because it will just immensely increase render speed for the parts that are dependent on the CPU. Yeah, and immediately you can see how fast Frontier gets. I will try to put them side by side as a comparison. And yeah, it definitely maxes out the chipset, I guess. The animations are super smooth as they can be probably. And yeah, if you want to play stuff like Frontier or other 3D games and that are CPU limited, basically, then the PiStorm is probably a very good upgrade. You can, of course, also, if you want to go the authentic route, take the ACA500 and put in a Amiga500 accelerator with a 68030 or something, which will be still plenty for rendering these relatively simple games. But again, you can also just go with the PiStorm. One thing that I have to say is obviously the Lazarustorm and PiStorm are much harder to set up if you're a beginner. The ACA500plus is basically plug and play, and you can just start with the gaming and the whole experience because the installation is all automatic. One other use case for the PiStorm, where you want to have as much CPU power as possible, would be productivity applications such as Final Writer, because that is actually pretty sluggish on a regular Amiga500. The ACA500plus, of course, also gives you quite a bit of power here, but rendering the fonts and the graphics that you would insert into such a document could still slow it down. And the PiStorm has more power than you can shake a stick at, basically. So yeah, this could be one option, but I mean, who uses the Amiga for writing, I guess? And there are also some older 3D programs that you could run that definitely want to eat CPU and FPU for breakfast. So that would be another great use case for that. And this is almost all I can tell you about these two cards. They come in at a very similar price point. I actually looked it up. A fully equipped Lazarustorm with the PiStorm on it and a Pi 3 installed with software and everything, you can get for also 150 euros roughly. So what you want to pick is a little bit a matter of taste. If you just want to have a plug-and-play solution, you're a beginner, or if you're just fine with 21 megahertz or 40 megahertz of acceleration and all the other features that the ACA has, go for it. It's definitely a great card and I will use it pretty often. It's very well done. It is expandable still. You can put a real-time clock on it with battery backup. You can put another accelerator card in there if at some point you want to have more power. It has 2 compact flash slots and it has the option to upgrade to wired Ethernet. I would love to see a wireless solution here, but that is not on the horizon yet as far as I know. The Lazarustorm, on the other hand, is basically everything is an open source project. There is a lot of development there. It has some features that make it useful for certain things. Massive CPU power, much more than the ACA500, a lot of RAM, and the option to simulate a graphics card, which I haven't shown you here, by utilizing the HDMI port. Basically, this would be the way to go if you want to use modern applications on the Amiga and really want to use it for productive and entertainment purposes beyond pure retro gaming. But that's it, basically. You have to decide, do you want more retro gaming, more authentic feel, then it's probably the ACA500, or do you just want to pimp your Amiga500 to the max, then it should be the Lazarustorm, I guess. Both cards have the great option to not require you to open up your machine, with a small caveat for the Lazarustorm, being that it requires the 7 MHz signal on the expansion port, and Rev 5 Amiga 500 won't have that. The Individual Computers card doesn't need that. It provides its own clock, it seems. But yeah, you can just plug it in and take it off if you want to have a stock Amiga 500 for demos or very old games that won't run otherwise. So that's why I have these, because I can basically upgrade the machine externally. But yeah, I think that's it. You can make up your mind on what you think about these cards. Leave a comment. Tell me about the accelerator cards that you are using. There are many more other options out there, but I just wanted to compare these two because they are basically non-invasive. You can remove them anytime, and that's a pretty neat thing. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like and share it on social media. You can support me on Patreon or here on YouTube or whatever, but you don't have to. But I would be glad if you come back at some point, and so long.